Hello, Gladys. Happy Saturday morning.
Hi, happy Saturday morning to you. I've kind of forgotten how to do this because we're both back from our second little summer break. We both went on holiday. How was your trip? It looked unbelievable. I'm a little bit jealous that you went to a couple of places that are very high on my list, but how was it?
It was amazing. We really spoiled ourselves. We really put a lot of effort into finding very nice hotels as well. It was great. We had a little Fiat to drive around. Well, I wasn't driving. I was the passenger princess. But it was great. No, I had so much pasta. We even did a pasta making course in Florence. I actually thought it's a lot harder than it turned out to be. Or maybe I'm just a pasta, I don't know, pasta queen. No, it was really cool. We've been to Florence, we've been to Pisa, we've been to Siena, Volterra. Oh my God, I hope everyone saw we did a little Twilight reenactment, which was actually not in Volterra. They say they're going to Volterra in the movie, but they did actually film it in Montepulciano, where we also went. So we did the reenactment there in front of that tower that is meant to be the home of the Volturis. I loved it.
I did see that, and I loved it, and I loved that you added a last story where it was like, if you know, you know, and I was like, Isabella, everyone knows. I think everyone gets it.
I just wanted to make it clear. Oh God, yeah. No, it was a great trip. How was yours? You looked like a Greek goddess on those stairs.
I felt like one. So I went to Athens, which was great. It was unbelievable. I really love it. Because I had actually heard quite mixed reviews. Not everyone I talked to about Athens or asked for recommendations or whatever was very excited. Some people didn't really like it. I don't know where these people went because honestly, it's one of my favorites. My cat is scratching at the door. So if you hear that, my apologies. My God, he's really going for it.
I can't hear anything.
Okay, good. So, it's honestly one of my favorite places, I think now. Also because I really love the whole Greek mythology thing and everything. And of course, that's where you need to go. We visited all the places. We did a day trip to Delphi, to the Oracle. We went to an island for a day. It was absolutely gorgeous. I would 100% recommend Athens.
Oh, I really want to go. I love Greek mythology as well. Which, going back to current things happening on social media, I'm surprised people think more about the Roman Empire than Greek mythology.
Right? I think about Greek mythology at least once a day, I think.
Yeah. But when I was wondering, when all the reels and posts came up with what's the female version of the Roman Empire, I was like, it's murder. It's 100% murder or Taylor Swift. Like,
I just shared the murder ones. A woman who's like, yeah, it's murder. Whether it's thinking about our own murders, how other people got murdered, or how we might murder, but it's murder.
Yeah, I agree. Oh well. Well, should we introduce our podcast?
Yeah, let's just get right into it.
Okay, in that case, welcome to Millennial Musings, everyone. I am Isabella.
And I'm Gladys, and we are just two opinionated millennials who have made dumb mistakes, and we still do sometimes. What we want to do here is share our experiences and offer the advice that we wish we had received.
And as always, a quick disclaimer, we are not therapists or life coaches, and we have no actual criteria to be giving advice whatsoever. But what we could be is your new bestie or big sister, so sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready for some millennial musings.
Yes, so we focus on different themes, and we try to answer 3 to 4 questions within those themes. Each question is one episode, and today is the second episode of our dating theme. And we will be diving into the question, straight men hate them or date them?
Yes.
Before we get into this episode, during the editing process, we realized that we forgot to announce something very exciting that we have coming up. We are doing our very first giveaway. So that's fun, isn't it? So we will be giving more information in our next episode. We will tell you how you can win, what you need to do. It's super easy. So keep your eyes peeled for that. So I hate men. Men suck. Why are men so horrible? It's only a few of the sentences that get casually thrown around nowadays. Some might say they get thrown around a bit too casually. But I just wanted to talk about what do we actually mean when we say this. Of course, when we say I hate men, most of us probably don't mean that they hate every single person who identifies as male. When I think about what I mean when I say these things, I mean that while I absolutely love and care about individual men, I hate the system that they grew up in and that brainwashed them into thinking that they're more than women or they're worth more than women. So I would say that, yes, when I think about that, when I think about fundamentally some of the issues within our society, I would say that as a group, as a whole, yes, I hate men. And we'll get into this more when we dive into feminism a little bit more as well. But I would like to say, first of all, that if as a man or a woman or whatever, you take more offense to that phrase than to why women feel like this, then, well, keep listening, because then that's exactly the problem, I think.
Yes, if you're the Mocho Docho Casa House type of men, keep listening.
Yes, so we have quite a lot to say about this, and I think you will kick off or start us off.
Okay, let me picture a little scene for you. Okay, so picture Pierce Brosnan, aka James Bond. He is in a beach bar, and because he's a spy, he has his binoculars with him. I assume that's the reason why. And then, while ordering or having a drink, he's noticing someone at the beach in the water. So, of course, he takes his binoculars and looks through them. And that's when the perspective of the camera changes for the audience to his point of view, looking through the binoculars. What also changes is the pace of the is the pace of the movie. Jesus Christ! Because what we see is Halle Berry, aka the Bond girl in Die Another Day, walking out of the water gracefully in slow motion. She's removing water from her hair, water dripping down her body. She's moving like, I don't know, like a panther, you could say. And yeah, it sounds quite spicy, doesn't it? Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the male gaze. But let me give you a proper definition of what the male gaze means. And I'm diving back into film theory because, yeah, I'm a film geek, but also it's like a nice way of explaining like that view of women through patriarchy, you could say. So the male gaze theory actually originates from a woman. She was a film critic. Her name is Laura Mulvey, and she wrote about it in 1975. And what it does is the male gaze refers to the presentation of women in visual arts and literature from a male heterosexual perspective, where women are depicted as like sexual objects for pleasure of the male viewer. So traditionally, the women that are displayed in movies that use the male gaze have functions on two levels. They are depicted as the erotic object for the characters within the story, but also as an erotic object for us viewers within the cinema audience or like the movie audience. So yeah, the male gaze places women in the context of male desire, essentially portraying the female body as eye candy for the heterosexual men. And yeah, by valuing the desires of the male audience, the male gaze supports the self-objectification of women. Yeah. And it's usually used on women that are stereotypically defined as attractive, sexy, and or feed into the sexual interest or agenda of male characters. So, as I said, why am I diving into film theory? Why do we have this little excursion? The male gaze isn't just something that happens on screen, it's just in general, or like even if it happens on screen or in literature, it's like it has an impact on how we women then feel like we should present ourselves in a certain way. It influences how women are expected to be and look like from men in this scenario. So enter here the monologue from the movie from America Ferrara. But yeah, we grew up within the male gaze because if you date a man, you are dating within the male gaze. And especially with the movies we watched, like in the early 2000s, there was always like a makeover scene where the cute, nerdy girl had to become more girly and more femme to attract like the hot guy. And what I want to say with this is that dating definitely made me question many times how I should present myself and what I actually enjoy myself to look like. But I will get into this a bit later on. And also, what I want to make clear is there's nothing bad with finding someone attractive and wanting them to know. However, big pronunciations on that, however, it's all about how you communicate this and about being respectful and not fucking creepy and gross when you communicate that you find someone, I don't know, attractive in any way. It's about manners here.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. This was so interesting. I love this. I love this introduction. Because yes, exactly what I was thinking as well is, of course, this is something that is so normal for us in media, to the point where when there's projects that do something different or that maybe do something and kind of try to flip the tables a little bit, people get offended by that because people are like, oh, no, we're not meant to do this. Women are not meant to talk about men or look at men this way, which is interesting because it's just so normal for us to think about women that way. And then, of course, that seeps into everyday life, or, you know, probably because this was already a thing in everyday life, then that's also why this became a thing in the film industry or whatever. But then also, yes, I was thinking about magazines, for example, where, again, Pierce Brosnan was an example where you see him and his wife. And this was a whole thing where they were in magazines and they were like on the beach. And both him and his wife had gained quite a bit of weight since his James Bond days. And then,
well, they've also aged about 20 years.
Of course, yeah. So they have aged and then their bodies have changed normally, but she got so much shit, and literally all of the headlines and everything was about, oh, she has let herself go and this and that. Whereas when this happens to men most of the time, and of course they get criticized as well in these horrible magazines, but it's more like, it's more accepted because then it's like, oh, they've become, you know, the dad bod, which is interesting because to become a dad, your body doesn't really have to do anything. Whereas why is a mum bod not a thing? Or why is it not a thing that's seen as something positive when they are the ones who literally need to birth the children, you know? So yeah, exactly. When we look at how men are being treated, or how we're much nicer towards for men, or how we treat them so much with so much more empathy when they age and when they gain weight or when their bodies change or whatever. And then I was also thinking about my fave, 90 Day Fiance, the amount of men who it just comes back time and time again, these men who, and you know, I never really want to judge anyone on their looks, but it's always men who are in no way, shape, or form conventionally attractive either. And they're always the men who are like, oh, no, but my partner needs to look like this, and she needs to have big boobs, but a slim waist, but big hips, and she needs to look like this and this. And it just that idea that as a woman, you need to keep trying and you need to keep a man's attention and you need to make sure that you don't let yourself go, and you need whatever that means. But it's just something that's so incredibly ingrained, this idea of like, oh, you know, if you don't keep trying for a man anymore, then, well, don't be don't be surprised when he gives up on you or when he goes somewhere else. And that's just not a thing the other way around to the same extent. It's just not.
No, it's not. And I think the best 90 Day Fiancé example, and I'm sure you were thinking about him as well, is Big Ed. Big Ed, before he even was with the woman he's now, when he had the girl in the Philippines and he bought her a razor and toothpaste.
I had forgotten about this. So the man that Big Ed, again, I don't want to talk about him too much. But this guy,
he's such a dickhead. I can't.
He is such a dickhead. And he gives me the creeps just because he's such a creep.
I mean, he also told what's her name? He's with her now.
Yeah, I don't know. He's had a couple of women. I'm a little bit behind.
Well, the current one is still the same one from that he met at the restaurant. He told her to lose some weight at some point and like to start going to the gym again. It's just like, and I'm currently watching 90 Day The Resort, something where like a lot of couples are like in this resort and they do like couple therapy, and they had like there's this episode about sexual pleasure. She was just like, well, she basically never can finish because he's always out of breath. And he was so insulted by this. But all the insults he gives everyone. Anyway, we're drifting away.
Oh my God. Also, the sex thing, what keeps coming back every single time is couples who, then they finally, because they met online and then they finally meet up in real life and then they have sex. And then the next day, the man is always like, this was the best night of my life. This was incredible. And the woman's always like, meh, I've had better.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, speaking of the male gaze and also looking at yourself through the male gaze, or women looking at each other through the male gaze, because that's the thing as well, right? This idea that women are just there to compete with each other for men. So I've talked about this in previous episodes and everything. I've gone through a bit of a journey with my body image and self acceptance, and I've really reached a point where I love my body, I love myself, and I'm not saying this to, I don't know, brag or whatever, because I know that this makes me very lucky, but I rarely or basically never have very bad body image days anymore. And I know, and if you still do, that's fine, and that doesn't mean that you're taking steps back or whatever. I think it's very human, it's very normal, but it just doesn't really happen to me anymore. Like I usually I don't really feel bad about my weight or whatever anymore. That for me, for the past, I don't know, maybe 4 years has just not really been a thing for me anymore. So imagine my surprise when I started dating my boyfriend, and at some point, so we were dating, it hadn't really been that long. And you actually, so we went somewhere with work and you took a video of me.
We went playing darts.
Yeah, we were playing darts. So you took a video of me playing darts and you sent me that video. And I watched that video of myself and I looked at myself with those same eyes as, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I was thinking the exact same things about myself that I used to think. And it was such a strange experience for me because I hadn't felt that way in so long. And I was looking at myself and I was seeing all of these horrible things. And I was like, oh, but I'm way too big and my hips are too wide and wow. And then I took some time to think about that and to reflect on this. And the conclusion that I came to was that because especially again, these past couple of years, I have been almost aggressively confident, and I haven't cared anything about what men, or I haven't cared about what men think about me and about my body, even though I'm very aware that it's, for many people, not the ideal body type. And I very much reached that point of I don't care if a man finds me attractive or not. And I genuinely don't. But now that I'm dating a man, and I mean, I do have to say, my boyfriend, I know that he thinks I'm the most gorgeous, beautiful person on the planet, and he would never, ever, ever say anything, and he has never even thought anything negative about my body. I know that. But just the fact that I was dating a straight man made me feel a little bit like, but now this is not true anymore. The I don't care about what men think about me, because now I care about what at least one man thinks about me, and what men like is a thin woman who looks a certain way. And it was just, and I just realized, wow, this is so incredibly ingrained in us to look at ourselves like this, like, oh yeah, but and this is something that growing up I was told as well, like, oh, do you really think that boys will like fat girls? Like, they don't like fat girls. And it was this thing that just came back out of nowhere, and I was so shocked, because I had been fine for so many years, and actually talks about this with my boyfriend as well, and he completely understood. And yeah, it's that idea of, because you just get told, right? You just get told all the time that, oh yeah, but if you gain weight in a relationship, or if your body changes in a relationship, like that's an issue, because your partner might not like this. And yeah, that was a strange one for me. That was a strange experience.
No, I feel you with that one. Just like, instead of weight, it was more like on my hair. But I'm gonna take a little step back into my dating history, if that's okay. So I mentioned this briefly in like previous episode, but I am bi, and I am now, though, in a hetero cis relationship, but with a guy. But I dated women before, and my last relationship before this was with a female. And just on a side note, for all the bi skepticals out there, no, it wasn't just a phase. Anyway, being bi, I did experience dating within the male gaze, but also out of sight of the male gaze, if you want to say so. But I definitely felt like in both scenarios that I had to present myself in a certain way. So when I started dating my ex-girlfriend, I kind of felt like, oh, I should be more of a tomboy, and I should wear maybe less feminine things. But this was not really because how she made me feel or because she said anything. I think this was, on the one hand, because of the societal influences and how queer women were represented a lot. But then also one of the main reasons was like the comments of others that I've gotten when I told them like I have a girlfriend, because they kindly informed me, oh, I would have never guessed because you don't really look like a lesbian. And I do have to say, this wasn't just straight people or straight men that said that to me. This came a lot from like the queer LGBTQI plus community, the surprise of, oh, really? So yeah, that was why we were dating. So I didn't really change much of my style, but I did add some like more tomboy clothes, like I wore a lot of shirts and stuff like that, which I still do. But anyway, I'll get to that later. So that relationship ended, and I cut my hair. I don't know if it was related, to be honest. I don't know if I had a Britney moment. I just felt like, you know what? I need something that brings me joy. I want to have a bigger change in my appearance. So I'm going to cut my hair short. So I had really quite a short hairstyle. At the same time, though, I started using more makeup. I don't know why. That was just a vibe. But I do remember a few nights when I went out in Vienna, strangers just came up to me, mainly women, and they were like, oh, it looks so good, but you're so brave for cutting your hair that short. And it's just, I don't know. It was a compliment, but why is it brave? I didn't understand. Yeah, anyway, after my breakup, I did go on dates with girls and boys. And I do remember every time it was like a date with a guy, I got a bit insecure about having this short hair, where with the girls, I obviously didn't really care at all. Because I just felt like, oh, they probably, because my pictures on my social media, on my dating profile, they were like pictures where I had more hair, but then also pictures where I had short hair. And I kind of felt like, should I explain to them though that I now have short hair? Which I didn't, and it was never a problem. But in my head, it kind of, I don't know, was a whole thing. But that also comes from my whole hair issues that I had back in the days. Listen to our episode. I think it's episode 6. If you want to know more about Afro. But yeah, looking back now, I don't know. I don't think it was ever about how I thought I should dress and look. I think it was mainly about trying to discover my identity, where I fit in, where I want to be. There's a lot to discover in your early 20s. So, yeah. Anyway, flash forward when I started dating my now boyfriend, a cis straight male. So when we met on our first date, I had braids. So my hair was long, you could say, and flowy and more femme. So that stressed the hell out of me to a point where actually for 7 months straight of him knowing me, I always had braids. Not the same set of braids. I redid them all the time, but I kind of planned it around weekends. I knew I won't be able to see him. So I cut the braids out at home. I had a little break for 1 or 2 days, and then I went to the hairdresser again and got new braids done. So he always just saw me with braids. But then after 7 months, I was like, I need a break. And I took the braids out and I got so nervous. Like, I prepared him to see me with my afro. I had a whole thing in my head. I was so worried he would like me then. Yeah, but obviously wasn't an issue. He loved it. And he had absolutely nothing to say about it except, oh, I like your hair. So I just picked it up in my head. And it's just interesting to see that it was actually myself seeing me in the male gaze and not him. Because he would never say anything or ask me to change anything then and now. I think it was my own bias. So that I had of the male gaze that then I projected towards any men.
That is very, yeah, that is something that I recently thought about as well, because I think yeah, and also I also wanted to say about the hair. I think having short hair as a woman, especially shaving your head, is such a thing, because when I did it, so I shaved my head during lockdown. I was one of those people. I shaved my head because I'd always wanted to know what it was like having a buzz cut. So I felt like, this is the time, because if it's horrible, I don't have to leave the house. So I did it, and I got so many comments, and exactly like you said, from the queer community, who were all like, oh yeah, but now you look even more queer. And now everyone will assume that you're gay. And initially my thought was, oh, okay, if that means that men don't harass me anymore, sign me up. Unfortunately, I was wrong, because I still got followed on buses by men, and I still had many incidents with men with my short hair. It is such a thing as well that I I never really cared at all, or I was never really aware of it that much. But my fashion set, if you could call it that, my fashion sense, or like clothing style or whatever, it's very eclectic. So one day I can wear like a very big pink tulle skirt or dress, and then the next day I can wear a suit maybe. But I realized, especially on those days where I was wearing a suit and I had the buzz cut, there was one conversation I was having with someone who was telling me about their coming out, and then they asked me, oh, how was it for you? How was your coming out as a lesbian woman? And I was like, okay, so actually I realized in that moment I had to come out straight, which was a very funny experience. And that person was absolutely shocked. They were like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure about this? Are you sure it's not a phase and everything? And yeah, I've had the same thing as well, also because I've always, many of my friends are LGBTQIA plus. Well, so am I probably. And then I've always been in those spaces, and and I always, from people as well, also because I never had a partner, they also always told me, oh, well, not everyone, of course, but there were gay men, for example, who were like, oh, have you finally realized that you're gay? And it is that thing where it's like, at the end of the day, we all want to put people into boxes, I think, and it doesn't matter what community or what group or what minority you're in. I think we all do it. And then about exactly what you said, projecting that feeling onto people that actually you don't really even know how they feel. I've definitely done that as well with, like I said, everything that we learn from media and whatever, where you eventually get this idea that, oh, a man just wants you to look like this and behave like this. And I've definitely done it as well, where I was like, oh yeah, men just don't want to date fat women, and that's just the thing, and that just goes for every man, which of course it does not. Like it doesn't go for every man. Decent men, and there are some out there, they won't care about that, and they of course would date fat women. And I had this conversation once with a colleague, I think, where I was going off, and where I was saying these things like, yeah, it's just dating a fat person is many people's worst nightmare. And then she asked me something along the lines of, yeah, but do you honestly think that that's the case for every single person? And then I kind of had to check myself as well, because I was like, yeah, no, that's kind of an assumption that I've made over the years. I've massively generalized all of this. Yeah.
No. Okay, so you mentioned a bit ago that even when you cut your hair short, you were getting catcalled by men and like a bit harassed by them when you were just out in public doing your own normal thing. And you also mentioned in the introduction at the beginning of the episode that it's not like we hate men, that we mean we hate every man and we generalize it. We hate the system masculinity is being put in, which I guess is toxic masculinity. And like always, I love a good definition. And for those who haven't really heard much about toxic masculinity, listen closely. So toxic masculinity is an attitude or like a set of guidelines that are stereotypically associated with manliness, what a man should look like, and that often has a negative impact, well, on men, but also on women and society in general. The term toxic masculinity isn't meant to imply that the idea of masculinity in itself is bad. Instead, it's meant to point out that certain behaviors and ways of thinking that are associated with masculinity, from mental and physical toughness to sexism and homophobia, have a negative and often dangerous impact on the world. And I actually got some symptoms or like signs of toxic masculinity. So one is, like I just said, homophobia. Toxic masculinity often teaches men that homosexuality is a deviation from traditional masculinity and that gay men are less masculine. And so, for example, they use terms like, oh, this is too gay for me, I can't do this. Then another thing is promiscuity. So toxic masculinity praises men for having multiple sexual partners, and it's really good, and it shows that you're the alpha. Whereas if a woman has several sexual partners, it's disgusting and she's a slut, and yeah. Then something simple as refusing to help with household duties. They reject the roles that are traditionally considered to be the work of women. And then also the sexual aggression towards women. They think they're entitled to women's bodies, and they are allowed to give us sexual comments and catcall us or whatever. But then also another sign is that men aren't allowed to show emotions. They have to be strong and don't show when they're sad and don't cry. And then also violence, like you can't talk about issues, you have to fist fight and just punch someone in the face. Which actually reminds me, there's this advert that came out a while ago by Gillette, the razor brand. And the slogan of the advert is, "We believe the best a man can be." It's really a good advert. It's presenting toxic masculinity, and it's trying to show how you can break that cycle of raising boys within their system. It got a lot of shit though. Like the advert, I think they lost even a bit of money because of it. But it's a really good advert. You just have to Google Gillette advert toxic masculinity if you want to take a look. Anyway, for me, toxic masculinity plays a big role when it comes to the men I don't want to date. But at the same time, it also creates women that I don't want to be around. because they can also be feeding into the toxic masculinity. You hear it on reality TV all the time. I want a tall, dark, and handsome, and strong, and whatever kind of guy. It just comes with specifics about what a man looks like. Which also reminds me, then I'll shut up for a second and let you talk. But remember when you and I went on holiday? We went for drinks with this group of people, and there was one couple, and the guy ordered some cocktail. I don't know, was it a pina colada or cosmopolitan or something?
Yeah.
And then she made fun of him, saying, "Oh, he's the girl in the relationship," or something like that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you then actually. Yeah, you actually spoke up and said, let the man order what he wants. And I think that's really what has to happen. Like, people need to speak up. Also, boys or guys, when they're out with their guy friends and one of them catcalls a girl, make him shut up. Tell him that it's not okay to do that. But yeah.
It was. There was this other woman as well who commented on it first. She said something like, well, that's a very manly drink. And then his wife, rather than saying, yeah, exactly, let the man have a drink, whatever he wants, she said, oh yeah, I make fun of him all the time because he's such a girl. And that's exactly it. I think we, as women as well, we jokingly say these things all the time, whether it's about gay men, for example, where we're like, oh yeah, I have many girlfriends and then I have gay friends, but yeah, they don't really count as men. Things like this, or even about straight men. I know so many women who talk about their partners or their boyfriends or husbands like that as well. Like, oh yeah, he's the woman in the relationship, or yeah, he's a man, but not really. And it sounds innocent, but it basically means that the second men are not being toxic or doing these very stereotypical things that we have learned a man should do, we start making fun of them, which I don't really understand. And then, yes, I mean, and I think many people don't, and me for a long time as well, because I was actually for many years that person who was like, oh yeah, but I want a real man, whatever that means. And I think many people don't realize how damaging these beliefs or these ideas can be. Because, and then also, for example, I actually have some so I went to Athens with my boyfriend, and we had a couple of examples there where it happens quite a few times that I asked for the bill and they came back and gave it to him. And then we had a conversation about it. And then my boyfriend said, well, a small part of me, and he knows that it doesn't make sense. And he has unlearned a lot of that. But he also said a small part of me makes me feel like I should pay, like I should be the one paying, and like it's not right if I'm not paying, even though he 100% knows that it's just bullshit. But yeah, and then also we went to another place, to this Mexican place where we got some food, and we got it to go because we wanted to just eat it at the Airbnb. And the waiter said something like, oh yeah, in the meantime, because they had one of those, it looked like a slushy machine, and he was like, oh, this is frozen margarita. While you wait for your order, kind lady or something, he said to me, I'll give you a frozen margarita. So he gives me one, and I was like, oh, why am I getting one and he's not? And then he said to my boyfriend, and I will give a beer because you of course don't like frozen margarita. I'll give you a beer. My boyfriend hates beer. He likes a cider. He likes a fruit beer. He hates beer. And he was like, actually, no, I wouldn't mind a frozen margarita as well. And the guy was like, okay. He was shocked. And I mean, of course, these are things that you could consider quite innocent things. But I think at the end of the day, these things are all connected. And yes, exactly like you said, I mean, I think definitely women should realize what they're implying when they say these things as well. And then men, of course, should learn to speak up as well and open their mouths, because And we will talk about this again when we talk about feminism, but yeah, it's always like, even, and it's usually the men who are the loudest when with saying things like, oh, but it's not all men, and yeah, but I'm not like that. But then when the homies make a sexist joke, then all of a sudden they've forgotten how to speak, they've lost their tongue. And that is just something. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the thing. It's like, okay, how many people, so many men will probably say that they're not the people who are doing horrible things to women, and they're not the creeps. But how many men are actively fighting women's fights with them, and how many men are actually speaking up? Not that many. I think I can count on one hand the amount of straight men that I have met who I trust will open their mouths, and I think the other ones will probably just laugh.
Yeah, I agree. Which also reminds me of, Terry Crews. Those who don't know it, very big black guy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He's also that meme where he sings, "And I need you, and I miss you." Anyway, he actually had a whole talk about how he was groped by a guy and like sexually harassed on some event, and he spoke up about it, and he said the reason he's speaking up is also because there are so many women who speak up that are not being taken seriously. So he wants to also speak up and actually show that this harassment is happening, because there are allies needed, and sometimes the person being the issue could be like the group. If you're a person of the group could be seen as the issue, you speaking up has the biggest effect. So men speaking up about sexual harassment can do a lot.
Definitely. But I also think it must also be very difficult for men to speak up, because I think, someone who looks like Terry Crews, nobody will take that seriously, and that is horrible, and it's so tragic. But in society as a whole, in general, if someone like that says, oh, I've been harassed, or I was in a situation where I was uncomfortable, or even men being assaulted or something, there is always that thing, there's always that idea that people have that's like, but how did that happen?
There are several cases of this. Like, I don't remember which podcast it was, but I listened to a case about a guy who was in the army, and while he was in the army, other men raped him, and no one actually believed him, because they're like, you're an army guy, like, you can defend yourself, I'm sure that didn't happen. Which also just means violence is always needed if you don't want to be harassed. And then the other thing is, it was another podcast episode, and again, I think it was Mordlust, a German crime podcast, where they talked about a man who was not just sexually harassed, but actually suffered from domestic abuse. Well, not just, it's both horrible. But he suffered from domestic abuse by his girlfriend, and he had trouble coming out and getting help, because people think, oh, how would a woman abuse a guy? Like, that's not really possible, which makes it hard for men to actually come out. Like, the numbers, I think, are lower with the abuse for men with the abuse towards men, because a lot of men are just also not coming out with it, because they maybe don't even see it as that, in a weird way. I don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, women are already not being believed, so then exactly, it's probably even worse for men.
Yeah.
But then that's another thing as well. Exactly, that's why we're saying that everyone will benefit from this. So when women come forward and speak out about sexual assault, which is very very what's the word, accurate right now with with everything that's going on with Russell Brand and everything, the comments that I have seen where it's like, oh, this is another witch hunt, and we're just trying to destroy men and everything. And it's like, I mean, I recently saw statistics of how many accusations are false, or how many accusations of rape are false, and it's 1 or 2%, if that, maybe even less. So why do we automatically assume that women are lying about this? It's so wild to me. But there's that idea, and everyone is just, well, so so many people now are just defending him, or the whole like, oh yeah, innocent until proven guilty, and whatever. And yes, to some degree, yes, that's definitely a thing. There's also cases where, for example, Kevin Spacey, I don't care how many times this man gets does not get convicted or whatever, if 30 people speak out and say that this man has assaulted them, I'm sorry, I don't care what happens in courts. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So and that's the thing, it's this mentality that also just harms men, because if you behave that way, and if you don't believe women, then yeah, you probably won't be believed either when you speak up.
Yeah, I agree. Ooh.
Yeah, we'll talk about this a bit more, I think, when we talk about feminism in general. But yeah, it's just such an important conversation to have, I think. So when I think about the title of our episodes, straight men hate them or date them, or it's probably more date them when you also hate them, or when you also hate, again, the system that we live in, and the system that has taught men that the world belongs to them. So it is a thing that I have thought about, where it's like, okay, so can we as women, you and I, for example, actively want to smash the patriarchy and at the same time be with people who actively are benefiting from this system? And it is difficult, and it is something, I think, that requires many conversations. And for me personally, I think, yeah, this is definitely possible. But I also know that for me, for example, I also knew when I started dating, I don't have any time for men who are not feminist. And I mean, actively trying to learn and fight as well. Just like I would have never wanted to date someone who was a homophobe, or who was racist, or who was whatever, in no way. And I think that's the thing that you see so often. And there's memes and TikToks about this, and we joke about it, but it's that thing where like where people, and I think online it's mostly women that people make fun of, where it's like women who are on social media, very active allies and everything, and then they're dating the man who's just very bigoted, and then they just make an exception for him. And yeah, I've just never really been about that. Well, I mean, as soon as I started realizing how important all of this was and how I felt about this, of course, when I was a teenager, we've all made mistakes. But yeah, that was just a thing for me. And that's the thing as well, that I will, if I go on the first date, best believe that I will test all of these things. And I asked there were things that I just subtly,
I remember when you started dating your boyfriend, how you said, I've done all the tests and he just passed. And the shock and disbelief you had.
He did pass. I would say something about, I don't know, bisexuality or something, and then he immediately went on this rant, and he was like, yes, and how bisexual men are treated differently than bisexual women, and the hypocrisy and everything. And I was like, oh my god, this man is literally passing every single test. Everything I throw at him, he just passes with flying colors. Yeah, so that is just something that for me is just very, very important. And I think my boyfriend, I think, is the first one to say that he hates men. So yeah, and he definitely has had these experiences where he meets someone, a guy, and he thinks, oh, this person's great, and they're chatting and they're having a really good time, and then out of nowhere that other person will say something very misogynist, or will make a sexist joke. And then for my boyfriend as well, he will say something, and for him that's the end of the conversation, and there won't be a friendship with this person. And I think that's what we need. And I actually don't think that we can accept anything less at this point from men.
No, I agree. And it brings me back to when women come and say, I have this list of what I want in a man with like tall, dark, handsome, good job, blah, blah, blah. I think the list needs to change. I think the list needs to be, I want a guy who's a feminist. I want a guy who's an ally to women. And I want a guy who will have conversations with me about toxic masculinity. Because you can't expect to find the guy that's completely healed from it. Because like we said, we both had that male gaze in our head as well when we started dating. But like at least get someone who's open and willing to hear, hey, when you said this or did this and this was quite toxic in my opinion, and blah, blah, blah. You know, have someone who's willing to learn at least. I mean, there have to be some foundations already. You can't just be the teacher for every bigot out there. But yeah. So let's move to our recommendation section. I've got two things. One will be just short and sweet. Go watch Queer Eye because if you want to learn anything about fighting the toxic masculinity, Queer Eye is the show for you. I assume everyone knows what it is, but just a quick summary of what it is. So it's the Fab Five, five queer people going to, well, visiting different people across America. And they sometimes pick the people perfectly that they're gonna not just have a makeover with, but have like deep talks. They teach them about how it's okay. For example, they went to a fraternity house with several guys living there, and they taught them that it's okay for guys to talk about their emotions, and they do a makeover of them, their home. They just give their life an actual push, and it's a very emotional show, and you should give it a go. It's not just like any other reality show. It actually comes with a meaning. And then the other suggestion I have is very random. It's called 911 Lone Star. So it's for everyone who loves a melodrama. It's like a bit Grey's Anatomy vibes, but it's with firefighters, paramedics. It mainly focuses on the firefighters though, and the 911 caller office thing, the back end of the 911 call as well. And why I'm mentioning this is it's a show about mainly firefighters, right? Which is like a very traditional masculine job. It's really nice to see, first of all, there are women in there as well, but the firefighter, the reason I'm mentioning this is because the chief of the firefighters actually explains to the guys that skincare is really important. And they got me with that because I do think skincare is important for male, female, anyone, any identity, really. Especially if you're a firefighter, like your face is having a lot of toxins coming at it. And it seems so weird and probably quite unimportant that I'm mentioning this, but it was just the introduction. It was in the first few episodes of the series, and I was quite skeptical of watching it because it was like in Texas and it's firefighters, and I was like, ugh. But then I saw it's created by Ryan Murphy, and he usually creates quite nice series. So that's why I gave it a chance, and I was just pleasantly surprised by all the issues that are addressed in the show. Yeah, it's not just a skincare routine. It's also in general, there are men suffering from traumas due to their jobs, and it shows that it's okay to talk about your mental illness, and it just really tackles a lot of toxic masculinity issues.
I love these recommendations because also, yes, like Queer Eye, for example, I think it's not wanting to be preachy or anything, like the show doesn't want to be preachy, or it doesn't want to, I don't know, blame anyone or make fun of anyone. It's just in the most tender way possible, just breaking down those barriers a little bit, I think. So that's what I love, and I tried to find books like that as well that I've read. I did struggle a little bit because I found there's two books that immediately came to mind, but they're both quite radical, I would say. The first one is I Hate Men, by Pauline Armange, I think. It's translated from the French, and this is a very, very tiny pocket book, and it is basically just an essay. It's very, very short, and it's it's about what we discussed, what I hate men means, and it is radical. It got there was a lot of controversy, I think, around it when it came out, but I did think it was very interesting. And then actually my boyfriend recommended this book. It's called Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates, and it's this woman who goes and investigates different groups of men, and kind of the psychology behind what they're doing and how they feel. So for example, she investigates incels and kind of tries and figures out why that's where that's coming from, and why incels act the way they do and why they feel that way. And of course, these are quite extreme examples of toxic masculinity, but I think it can be good to have that awareness, I think. And because I honestly, I think many of these things, when we look at incels or, I don't know, the extreme right or whatever, of course, it's very easy to look at that and be like, oh, that could never be me, so I don't need to, think about this or be aware of this because I'm not like that. But I think in many ways, the same ideals that these people have based themselves on are also the ones that we have in society, maybe to a lesser degree. But I think, we still kind of, in many ways, do think that way. And then another one that I read is, it's called Safe, on Black British Men Reclaiming Space. So this is actually an essay collection written by Black men. And I think, I wanted to buy that book and read it because I think we don't often see books about these topics that are written by men. I think most of the time, when it's books about racism or being Black and queer, or it's usually Black queer people or Black women, but we don't really, it's not usually Black straight men that we, at least I think when I think about the books that I've read, I think they're mostly written by women on these topics. So these essays are about toxic masculinity as a Black man, about being queer in a Black man, about mental health conversations in the Black community and things like this. And I thought it was very, very interesting as well. And I think, again, to create some awareness around these things, I think that's a great recommendation as well.
I love them. They sound really interesting. Really good. So before we wrap up, we wanted to say a big thank you to all of you that made it to the end of the episode. We hope you enjoyed it and maybe even heard something that you can relate to. But remember, the journey doesn't end here, because we will be back with a brand new episode next week.
And the best part is we want to hear from you as well. Also, we do have, so in a previous episode, we asked for your dating stories. We do have quite a few already, but if you have some, there is still time to send those in. So write into us or reach out to us on Instagram, because there's some juicy ones and we can't wait to share them with you, because we know that everyone has their own experiences and you all have stories to share. So don't be shy. Connect with us on Instagram at We Are Millennial Musings. Share your own musings, funny moments, and the not so glorious times of being a millennial. And also, if you have some time, you can also rate our podcast and follow the podcast if you haven't already, which makes a massive difference for us, or to us. So if you would like to rate the podcast, we would be very grateful.
Absolutely. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. So thank you. Until next week, stay curious and keep those stories coming. Bye.
Bye.